I'm gonna make you an offer you can't refuse.
In smoky rooms where deals are made, loyalty the ace he's played. A friend of ours, he'll stand up tall. Through gunfire smoke, he'll never fall. With heart of gold and steel resolve, a mystery we'll never solve.
Brothers and sisters, welcome to the first episode of the Friend of Ours podcast. This is a limited edition podcast hosted by your main man, Duke Loves Rasslin, and of course, the godfather of wrestling, the legend himself, Mr. Big Vito LoGrasso. How you doing there, Vito?
I'm doing good, Duke, and I'm glad that we got this thing underway. You know, it took a while, but I tell you, I had to make you an offer you couldn't refuse, and the offer was pretty stiff.
Yeah, the offer was still. Listen, those body shots, man. I'm still recovering from those. You didn't leave any marks on the face, but you know,
Yeah, that's exactly it. Never leave marks on the face. Always go to the ribs, touch on the legs, never in the groin, because then the wife complains that the husband isn't producing. So, I mean, I got it covered.
yeah, you got it covered and then some. Listen, you've been doing this Godfather wrestling thing, and it's been taking off like hotcakes. I gotta ask, okay, and this is an exclusive here. This is the first time anybody's going to hear this for sure. How much of this are you tapping into real life and some of your previous experiences in life and adding that to the mix here?
I'm going to be honest with everybody, and this is, if anybody knows me, they know I grew up in the lifestyle of Italian history and La Cosa Nostra. That's a very strong term that we don't use too often, but La Casa Nostra is something that is sacred, something that you believe in. It's a club. It's something that you take part in, and if you believe in the rules of the game, it's something that is what a family is about. And when you were La Casa Nostra, the family can be very large. Now, getting involved in all the activities, you do have choices. Me growing up, I had choices. And being that I grew up in a, how would you say, a wise guy lifestyle with real life family members being in charge of certain families like the Luciano family, which that is my uncle, being part of the Castellano crime family, which was part of my uncle and is a cousin, being that my other grandfather was involved in some underworld business. Two of my uncles were killed mob style. And then being in Staten Island and Brooklyn in that time zone when John Gotti was reigning supreme, Paul Castellano was there, the Gambinos, the Anastasios. Um, Everybody remembers Angie from Mob Wives, Big Ange. I used to hang out in her club. I used to hang out in all the clubs, be part of the country club, and then actually get into some things where I got into a few fights where they actually wanted to kill me and assassinate me, which is legit and it's very famous that there were a couple sit downs because I happened to beat up a wise guy and they were looking for me and they said he can't be touched. And it was a whole story that went with it that the wise guy was out of line, so nobody could touch me. And they weren't touching me anyway because between my father, my grandfather, who I was related to, and who I was with, nobody was touching me. So, Duke, I mean, it goes a long way. And I think I touched on some of the fights I've had, on the street with some pretty, um, what would you say? notorious people back in the day, Duke?
Well, I just this is fascinating. I mean, this is legitimately like a true crime show here in this moment. But I do wonder. I mean, when you think about the fight that was probably the most dangerous, the fight where you were dealing with somebody who had the juice, had the cachet that they could take you out. And I'm not talking knuckling up. I'm talking about after the fact because you had no business fighting with them in the first place. How much can you say? What was the most dangerous fight where even you were like, man, I probably shouldn't have done that?
Well, there was a fight where um, my brother was driving a car, and this gentleman was shoveling in a snowstorm, and he threw snow at our car. My brother got out of the car. He was only like 18 at the time, and my brother mounted off to him. The guy came up on him. He was an older guy, and he started mounting off to my brother. I stepped in front of my brother, and then before you know it, he goes. His daughter ran across the street and slapped me in the face. The guy threw a punch, and he tried to get my sweatshirt over my head. My brother stepped back, and then people blocked my brother from joining in. And this guy was 300 pounds. He was a beast. He had to be six something. He was definitely about 6'4". And I knocked him out cold in the snow. So I go back to the house, and somebody comes up to my door, and he said, "Vito, they're looking for you." I says, "Who's looking for me?" He said, "The guy you just knocked out in the snow." He said, "He's a hitman for the mob. They want you." So I stayed tight for a couple of hours, and I went back to the guy's house by myself. I knock on the door. He looks out the window, and they let me in the house. Now I was unarmed, and I wasn't going to, looking to fight him. I was looking to squash this on my own without making it a big ordeal. So I walk in his house. The wife is there, the daughter's there. He says, I could shoot you right now. I says, "Yeah." I said, "But I didn't come here for you to shoot me. I came here because I got out of hand, and I was just protecting my brother." I said, "And you can understand that." And I said, "I'm not looking to make no trouble." I said, "I just want to squash this, and let's, walk away from this." So he agreed. We shook hands, and the guy was a hitman for the mob. A week later, 2 weeks later, they found his brother in the trunk of a Cadillac in South Beach Psych. And about a month or two goes down, and they foreclosed on his house, and he moved out of Staten Island.
Jesus, wow,
And that was just one fight. Then there was another fight I was in where I was at Gargiulo's, which was John Gotti's territory, and I was bouncing a Christmas party with a couple of guys I knew. They said, "Vito, you want to make $150? Want to come to a Christmas party? Got to wear a suit jacket. It's a nice place. Gargiulo's is probably one of the most famous and elegant places you could ever dine." And they tell me, "Hey, listen, there's a fight outside. Go break it up." So me and a couple of guys go downstairs. A fight breaks out in the street in front of Gargiulo's. So I go to break it up, and then there's this guy, this older guy. He comes running across the street, and he tries to tackle me. And I looked at him, and I shoved him off. So he comes flying at me again. This time I pick him up and I throw him on the windshield of the car. And I was ready to crack him. And my friend hooked my arm. He says, "No, he's a made guy." So him and his five guys who they were fighting, the guys fled, but the five guys who were there from the social club, they dragged me back behind the fence, and they closed the fence of Gargiulo's. So they and back then I was on 150, man. I was on high octane. I was about 275. I was just intense. So this is, "Hey, tough guy, why don't you come out from the fence and see how tough you are?" I went to climb a 6 foot fence. They ripped my jacket off me, keeping me in that place. And I told them all, I said, I will kill all you motherfuckers. So I went ballistic and they had to calm me down and they had to pull me in the building. So the next day, I get a phone call from my brother, and my brother says, "Hey, did you get into a fight last night?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "How did you know?" He said, "I got Julio's." He says, "Yeah, they're looking for you. They want to kill you." I says, "You kidding?" He says, "No, the old man flew out of here and they went down to 18th Avenue." I said, "They're having a sit down right now." He says, "The people, the wise guys, and everybody from Gargiulo's are there. They want you. They want you dead." So what wound up happening in the sit down was they asked him, they said, the guy didn't do anything wrong. He went to break up a fight. He said, "You're a made guy. What are you doing fighting in the middle of the street? And you were part of the social club, the coffee place that was next door to Gargiulo's." Well, something got out of hand. Yeah, so the guy didn't do anything wrong. He was just doing his job. And by the way, you can't touch him. So that was another time where they wanted to kill me. And then I wound up meeting the guy. The guy came to the gym at night and he told me, pulled up. I had just finished working out and he had somebody with him and I dropped my gym bag. And the guy says, "I'm not here to start no fights with you. Just calm down." He says, "I just wanted to let you know it's a misunderstanding and you're barred from Gargiulo's for life. Don't ever show your face there." So I said, "Okay." So that was the second time. Third biggest fight, probably, that I really went wackadoo, was at the bistro restaurant where a guy was, would you say, I had broken up with my fiance at the time, and he was trying to date her, and then I found out that the guy was took her out on a date, and he knew I was with, and the guy was married. So I walk up to him in the bistro in front of his wife, and I said to him, I says, "Hey, how you doing?" I says, "You took out." So I guess you'll beep that name out when you get the recording. Anyway,
Sure.
this is yeah. I says, "Good." I said, "Come on, let's go outside in front of his wife." So I got mad. I gave my buddy Mike my pouch. He said, "Vito, where you going?" I said, I said, "I'm gonna kick the shit out of somebody. You should come and watch." And when I was gonna fight, and pretty much when you're a bouncer in Staten Island or you're in charge of security, you're doing anything, you never lose a fight. And I was one of the best street fighters they had, and I never lost a fight. So I'm going outside, and everybody's looking at me. Old man Tony and everybody said, "Vito, what are you doing?" I said, "Nope." I said, "This is going down right now." So I get out there, and I start yelling and screaming. The guy's yelling at me back, and told him, I says, "I will kill you right now." I said, "I will stick you in a dumpster. I don't give a shit who your father is." And everybody just froze. They tried to give a guy a gun before he came out because they knew I was going to throw him through the front glass of the place. And I told him, I said, "I'll even throw you through the plain glass window right there." And I was cursing. I was hot, sweating. And finally, Tony, the manager, who was one of my friends and one of my managers, Vito, he says, "You got to calm down." He says, "This is going to get bad." I says, "F everybody here. I don't give a shit." I said, "I'm taking them out." And they had to literally walk me away. And, the cops weren't going to bother me because all the boys who worked for the 122 were my buddies. And nobody called the cops back then. If you had a beef, you took care of it. But, I mean, talk about a crowd of people, and I told them I'd throw them in the dumpster. I mean, nothing ever came of it. But that was another time where it got heated, and I wind up talking to the guy months later, and we settled our differences, shook hands. But his father was pretty well known, and things could have got pretty bad. But nobody ever took a chance to mess with me because I was with a family or two, and I did work for them, and everybody knew just stay away.
So here's my question with something like that, because this is fascinating. First of all, you're dealing with some heavy people, and in order to be who you are in that world and survive the way that you have, you're a pretty heavy dude your own self, and you're trying to downplay it here, and I get it, but you're a pretty heavy dude if you're able to stand toe to toe with guys like that. How do you go from that to the world of pro wrestling, where you're standing toe to toe with people who the majority of them could never survive in the world that you're coming from? The majority of them could never even comprehend the stuff that you had to see throughout your life. And yet you got to lose matches to these folks. How are you able to make that transition and turn off that very real, very serious survival instinct that you have and exist in this pro wrestling world as long as you have?
Well, my goal in my life was to be a pro basketball player and be an athlete. And I was an athlete. I was going to play pro basketball. I played basketball in Madison Square Garden. Captain of the basketball team, Division I scholarship, and I tried out for the Olympic baseball team. I was going to play semi-pro football, but just for some reason or another, a lot of things going on in my life, and I never got to accomplish those things. Then, a lot of people say, what kind of work do you do? I've had every job you can think of, and even sitting behind a desk. I worked in the World Trade Center working for steamship companies doing rates. So anybody who doesn't know Vito LoGrasso and his intelligence or his IQ, I am probably one of the most intelligent human beings you'll ever meet. Very smart. Even when the people listening, when I speak to Duke on a private level and we have conversations, they're very intriguing, and we talk about some very real life things, not just wrestling, folks, but just like real life things that have to do with life. And even Duke, in the beginning of our friendship, was surprised. He says, "Man, you deep." He says, "I never knew this looking at you, how intelligent or smart or how much savvy or worldness you really have." And it just goes with world experience. And then when you talk about surviving in the wrestling world, it's a game where you have to learn how to fight and you have to learn how to wrestle. I learned how to wrestle. I learned how to fight according to their rules. Now, there are people who are in power in the walls of the companies I work for who were in power. It was like the mob, but it was an indoor mob. It was an enclosed club. It was something that was different. Kind of had the same rules. You don't touch the office. You don't touch any maid guys. But the people who were in the office, if you took them outside the four walls of those companies and they were on the street, number one, they wouldn't talk to me like that. Number two, they wouldn't say half the things they said to me. And definitely wouldn't treat me like that. So it became a business decision on how you want to make a living. Now, I had opportunities to make a living a certain way, but it wasn't in my heart. I did do jobs and I did take positions with unions, um, and be a driver for somebody, and you know, um, work in very sophisticated clubs, country clubs, know a lot of people, and through those acquaintances, I became a very even more popular friend once I hit superstardom in pro wrestling. Duke, it's a business, and every business there is an agenda, and you know it better than anybody. Especially, let's take the podcast world. Now, Duke, you've been doing podcasting for about 9 or 10 years, and you've established a brand of Duke of Wrestling. And inside these walls of podcasting, there are rules that you follow. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
And there's a business ethnic and unforeseen rules that you abide by. Am I correct in saying that?
If you want to be successful, absolutely.
In the podcast world of Duke of Wrestling, kayfabe does exist, but in a different world and a different word used. It's just like wrestling has kayfabe, you know, the mafia, this thing of ours, has its own set of rules. La Cosa Nostra has its own set of rules. You don't go to the cops, you take care of your business, you handle your things on the street, you don't mess in somebody else's territory, you know, and for what's out there and how it's publicated to the public, the most famous mobster is John Gotti, the Teflon Don. Now, being famous with the suits, always in the news, beating all the federal raps, he was one of the most famous. Lucky Luciano, my uncle, was another famous, mobster. Then you had Al Capone. So you talk about like being somebody who you look up to and who you're with. I mean, every different business has a kayfabe. So, wrestling business, you have to abide by their rules. And, if you want to be successful, there was a podcast that Dutch Mantel just did, and it was on my newsfeed. And they said, Vito, go to 42 minutes of the podcast. I had my wife listen to it. And Dutch was talking about my ability in the wrestling business. The question was, why didn't Vito make it bigger in the WWE? His answer, Vito probably didn't politic. He was very good. And in the 60s, doing his German gimmick, would have been one of the top heels in the world. So politicking and talking the business, and I'm going to be honest, and I'll tell everybody straight up, was I a politicker? No, I wanted to get there on my own. I wanted to wrestle and show the world I was the best wrestler there ever was. I wasn't a politicker. And that's what probably held me back some, even though I accomplished great things being a street kid from Staten Island and Brooklyn, but I did it my way, and because I was a wrestler. Definitely didn't do it because my bubbly personality, or I knew how to talk to people. People wanted good wrestlers. They hired Vito. They needed a job done. They hired Vito. All the veteran wrestlers respected me because I played the rules by the game. And that's why I'm so well liked and respected in the world of wrestling. When you talk about the underworld, at that time, I was very well respected and people knew who I was. So, I mean, different rules for different businesses, and it's different strokes for different folks. I just happen to dabble and be somebody in a real life lifestyle that I grew up in.
To be who you are in wrestling and having to, play this character when in real life you're a guy that people really don't want to mess with. It's fascinating. Again, it's very interesting that you possess the ability to be both people, and you managed to pull it off pretty damn well. So kudos on that front there. I wonder about something though, because you're a guy who, again, you're the real thing. This isn't a joke. You are related to some of the biggest names that we know of from organized crime. Um, when you see other people portray mobsters and these figures in pro wrestling and even in entertainment in general, what goes through your mind? I mean, how do you personally feel about it? Because some are really good, some are not so good. As a guy who's seen the real thing and grew up with the real thing, a guy who, I'm not going to say you're the real thing because I don't think that you're a criminal, but a guy who knows something, who has an understanding of what that real world actually is. What's your take on the way that folks have been portrayed in pro wrestling and entertainment in general?
Well, when you talk about, being like me being myself, Big Vito LoGrasso, that was a natural thing. That's why it came off so well on the Mamalukes. And then when you were with the FBI, it came off as a natural thing because that's who I was. When I see guys doing it today, they're trying to be a gangster. They're trying to act Italian. They're trying to be this, portray something that they're not. That's why it doesn't come off good. Now, if you do have a seasoned veteran with you to teach you how to be this character, it would be a lot easier for the person doing it to get the rub and be successful doing something they never did before or never lived a lifestyle. It's just like when they do a movie. I'll give you, let's take John Travolta when he did the movie role Gotti, right? He studied John Gotti to the T, and some of us get to even know some of these people on a personal level, which makes it even more real life because you know the tendencies, you know the way they act, they know how they hang out, you know what they do. You get to watch their mannerisms, how they talk to people, how they react in certain situations. Me, it's just a natural thing when, hey, I'm going to crack your fucking head open and I don't give a shit who you are. I mean, that's as legit as it's going to get. But then, in today's world, everybody's a cop caller. You got to refrain from this. But if somebody was to, come up on my wife or do something to my wife or do something to somebody in my family, you think I'm going to refrain from anything? Absolutely not. Not happening. I always say it. It's thank God I moved out of Staten Island in 2006 because for the amount of stuff that goes on in my family, like with my brothers and other family members, and back home, I definitely would have handled and taken care of things, and nobody would get out of line, and that's for sure. For all the stuff that that's gone down, with my family back home, they all wait to tell me, and they wait till it blows over before they tell me things, because they know my first reaction. They know how I'll get, and if push came to shove, I'd get on a plane and I'd take care of it myself.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And it's interesting because you're not the only guy who has lived the life for real and then has gone into entertainment, for lack of a better term, and been successful. There's a man by the name of Chuck Zito, who I hear is an old friend of yours. Talk to me about Chuck Zito.
Now everybody knows Chuck Zito. He was in the famous TV series Oz, but before that, he was in WCW, um, portraying a real life gangster. Now, if anybody ever looked up Chuck Zito, they know that he is legit as they come. Now, if you ever hear some of the stories about Chuck Zito, we come from the same places and we know some of the same people, and we talk online, and if I ever have a problem, he's my consigliere. Who better than Chuck Zito to be my consigliere when I'm doing business, right? So the reason they got rid of him in WCW was not because he did anything wrong, because he was too legit, and they didn't want that presence. It wasn't that he did anything. It was just who he was. And then I found out something, and I thought it was great. I thought it was the best thing I ever said. Not good for him, but the way he handled business. There's some footage of him doing an interview on why he does not do Hollywood. So I listened to it, and I was like, wow, this is great. If you ever heard the term, people, open hand slap, I can't tell you how many people I gave an open hand slap to, right? And you always hear bada bing, an open hand slap, let me crack you one, you know? Those terms are real. But when you really do it on a movie set with actors, with important people, and you don't give a shit who they are, that makes you 10 times more lethal. Now, according to the interview that I listened to, he didn't take shit from no actors, and he beat the shit out of a few people on set, and the actors were afraid of him, and it's in the interviews online. And I thought it was like, man, he's just like me, because like if I didn't like you, or like people in the beginning of wrestling say, "Oh, Vito's tough, man. He'll get up and beat the shit out of you, and like give you a crack." And I'm laughing because I said, "Man, this is like looking in the mirror of how you handle your business." And then when push comes to shove, you don't back down. You always show up. You always, stand up for who you are, and you live by it. Is it always right when people, how would you say this? When people don't know you, they don't open up the book and they judge you by the cover, it's never right. But once they open up the book and they see who you are, they're fascinated to know, wow, you're a real human being, not this guy who just stands there, doesn't smile, always ready, hands are always cocked, always looking behind him, always aware of my presence, where I'm at, what the door's got, who's at the door. Those are things that's just basic instincts. He is the same way, 10 times deeper for the people he's associated with. And I respect him tremendously because he didn't change his ways to be this movie star on a Travolta level. I mean, everybody knows, I don't know if anybody knows, but his pal is Sylvester Stallone. And you mean to tell me Sylvester Stallone can't get him a job, right? So there's another reason why it doesn't work. He's friends with a lot of heavy people in the entertainment industry, in the sports industry, in the political world. He's associated with some pretty powerful people. But, I'm sure if he wanted to do something, I'm sure it can happen, but he's happy doing what he's doing now. And it's just like anything else. Vito, when are you going to make it in the WWE? Vito, when are you going to make it in WWE? Hey, I was my own man, and when it happened, it happened. It wasn't me kissing anybody's ass to get in there. I just didn't politic. And everybody forgets, I started in there in 1991. And I would tell Duke, I don't know if I ever told you the first day on the job, my first car ride in the WWF, did I ever tell you the story?
No, no, I'm all ears now.
So the guy who got me into WWF was a gentleman by the name of Sonny Blaze. He used to work for Pat Patterson and Tony Gurria. He used to be the guy who used to get the enhancement talent. So I was on a Johnny Rod show, and he said, "Hey Vito, you want to come up and do WWF TV?" So I says, "Yeah." I said, "Love it." So this was in my first year of wrestling. Johnny was furious, but I went anyway because I wanted to be Vito. I didn't want nobody to hold me down. I wanted to conquer the world. I went. So I'm sitting there in the car. I'm driving in the car with Sonny Blaze. It's myself. It's Peter Weeks, the Dublin Destroyer, Mike Iorio, and a guy by the name of Al Coleman. This guy Al Coleman is breaking my balls and they're freaking trying to get me, right? The whole car way up. So I'm like, I don't like this guy. So Al Coleman and all of them were huge monsters. I don't know if anybody knows who Mike Iorio is. He's a friend of mine. And he's 6'9". He's as big as Sid back then. You know, the Double and Destroyer was 6'4". He was another 280. Peter Weeks was another 280, 300 pounds. This guy Al Coleman was a weightlifter, and he worked as a correction officer, and he was pretty stout, and he was about 250, and he was jacked. So we're driving, and we're going back and forth in the car on the way back from the show, and he's breaking my balls. And I said, "Yeah, you're a stupid son of a bitch. You should go to Riff. Maybe you'd learn something. You can't even speak." Well, the car friggin' breaks up. So he says something back to me, and I said, "Oh, yeah?" I said, "Al, stop the car." He says, "What do you mean, stop the car?" I said, "Stop the car. We're doing this now." So everybody became silent. Everybody just said, "What do you mean?" I said, "We're stopping the car. I'm getting out of the truck, and I'm going to kick his fucking ass on my first day on the job." So everybody just was like, uh, you know, come on, stop. I said, "I'm not playing." I said, "Just get out of the car." So we're running out of gas, and he had to pull over on the next exit. Now, Sonny Blaze is shitting his pants because we still talking. I'm friends with him till today. He said that was the scariest moment in my wrestling life when you said stop the car. He still talks about it today. I get out of the car and I undo the van door. I said, "All right, motherfucker, get out now." So they all look at me like I'm freaking nuts. I said, "Get out." I said, "Let's go. We're doing this." "Oh man, you don't want?" I said, "Yes, I do. Right now." And that set the tone because nobody ever messed with me again. I'm sure word got out that I was going to kick his ass, but nobody ever went at me ever again, never busted my balls ever again. I set the tone from day one.
Unbelievable. You walked into the business that way. Unbelievable.
No, really, seriously, I did. It's the truth. It's the truest story you'll ever hear. And it's like, if I was going to fight, I could back it up. I said, "Okay, let's go." I didn't give a shit. I'm telling you, I was that nutsy. And yeah, I'll give you another story. My brother-in-law calls me. He says, "Hey, can you help me out?" I says, "What's wrong?" He says, "Well," he says, "I caught this guy stealing cable from me. He owned a phone company." I says, "Okay." I says, "And then he's writing phony hours and cashing checks for people." I says, "Really?" He says, "Yeah, the guy from the check cashing place called and he told me what he was doing." I said, "All right, invite him down for a meeting." I says, "And let's get it straightened out." So the guy walks in, and my brother-in-law's sitting at the head of the table. I'm sitting across from him, and I'm talking to him, and I said, "Listen, are you stealing cable?" He says, "What fucking business of it is yours?" I said, "Okay." I open hand slapped him like you never heard. You. It was like a gun went off, like a boom. Then I proceeded to take him, and I had him half out the second floor window of his office. My brother-in-law had to pull me off him because he talked to me rude. He said, I said, "And you're gonna pay the money back, and you're gonna get the money back, and you're gonna get the cable back. You ever steal again, you're going head first next time." This dummy goes to the wise guy that my brother-in-law was with, Big George. So he goes up to George and he says, "Yeah, I have a problem." He says, "What's the problem?" He said, "Vito was going to throw me out a second floor window." He says, "Vito?" He says, Vito doesn't bother nobody." He says, "You must have pissed him off. What'd you do?" "Well, I was stealing cable from his brother-in-law and cashing checks." He says, "And you come into my club and you're telling me that you were robbing somebody and Vito was going to throw you out the second floor window?" "Yeah." He says Vito should have threw you out the window, picked you up, and threw you out again. How dare you come in here looking to friggin' get a hit on Vito and looking to do something when he didn't do nothing wrong and he's protecting his brother-in-law's business. He says, now you owe me money and you're going to pay back the money from the guy.
Wow.
That's how much juice that I had in Staten Island. All he had to say was, Vito was going to do this. Vito. And then the guys in there looked, they said, what the I said, Vito doesn't bother nobody. He's quiet, man. He says, if you get him going, it's on. Like, and that was like another situation where like you just took care of business on the street. And if people don't know, well, I helped build the first Costco on Staten Island. This is going way back. And my brother-in-law had a phone company and I was working for him. And here it is, the guy who was doing the electric and my brother-in-law got into it. So the guy cuts all the phone cable and he tries to sabotage the job. My brother-in-law comes to me and he says, Vito, he says, we have a problem. I says, what's the matter? He said the guy sabotaged the cable and he messed it up and then he won't let me use the machine, the high-low, to go and get up and on the roof of the place and repair the cable. I said, do you know he did it for sure? He goes, yeah, he did. I go over and talk to the guy. So the words I had for the guy, and then about 4 or 5 hours later, hey Vito, I got a phone call from the guy. I said, yeah, he's going to let us use the machine, and then he's going to help repair the cable. I said, really? He says, did you talk to him? I says, you already know I did, so the job will be completed and you're going to do okay. True story.
Vito LoGrasso and his adventures. I'm telling you, man, they need to make a movie about your life with this stuff here. One of the things that I know through the years people have always wondered about, because look, Italian culture is something that, especially here in the United States, it's just something that's ingrained. People love it. You see it in entertainment, you see it in movies, you see it in documentaries. It's something that will never go anywhere. It's celebrated, it's appreciated, it's mythical and what have you. So I want to ask you this, and this is a good tip for anyone listening out there. No matter where they are in the country, of course, there's an area where you can go to a nice Italian sit down restaurant, grab a bite to eat, a drink for date night, the whole 9 yards. Vito LoGrasso, as an Italian, as a guy who's worked in the restaurants, as a guy who loves to cook, you know what's what and who's who and all that good stuff there. I need you to help our listeners out. There's a guy listening right now who's got a date on a Friday night. He wants to impress this girl. He's going to take her to a nice Italian joint. Let's start from the beginning here. What is he ordering for the appetizer, for the meal, for the dessert? And what is he ordering to drink for the whole meal there? Help us out here, Vito LoGrasso.
Well, if you go into an Italian restaurant and you go in there for taking your lady or your gumad, because gumads need to go out and eat too, you know. Hey, listen, it's no laughing. This is serious, okay? Um, you start the evening what's in what you do with a classy thing. What would you like to eat? If it's your place, hey, I recommend, the fish, or you can go Italian. Usually, you try to go with the fish, or you go with the Italian. When you order in drinks, you order wine. So you either order a Chardonnay like I do because I like to have a glass of Chardonnay, which is classy, and you're having a glass of, you bring the bottle over. If you got the money to do it, a glass is fine. But if you're trying to impress your lady and you want to take her out, you bring a bottle of Chardonnay. You're not going to get loaded on it. It's a nice casual wine. It shows you have some diplomacy, some etiquette, some class, some sexiness to you. So as an appetizer, you know, usually you get a shrimp cocktail, you get some galamad, you know, try not to get nothing, if you're gonna get a Caesar salad, something like along those lines, or if you get the bruschetta, which is very good. Make sure that they bring over fresh Italian bread, hot in the oven. Then for your meal, as you sit down, if you're gonna have like the seafood, the broiled seafood platter, because women are gonna not try to eat too heavy on a first date because they don't want to show any overzealousness. But the fish is probably the safest way, it's the lightest way. For dessert in an Italian place, tiramisu or a cheesecake is usually the way to go. Me personally, I'm a tiramisu guy, or if a lady is a cheesecake lady. So what would you do? Hey, would you like to split half and half? This way she can have, half your tiramisu, you get half a cheesecake. You know, if you like um, melon, always order a plate of melon with anisette or sambuca, and you dip the sambuca with the melon. It's a taste that you will never ever forget, and you will constantly do it in the summer, in the winter, in the fall. Always have anisette or sambuca in your house because you're always going to have some melons, some strawberries, some cantaloupe, something. And if you put it in the sambuca, it is going to be the best tasting thing you ever had in your life. So if you don't want to have dessert at the restaurant, there's always an Italian coffee shop where you get a pastry and an espresso or a cappuccino, and you take her out to that place. So you just took her to two different places to have some, wine and diner in some Italian fashion. If you can do it and it's in your neighborhood, look it up. See where there's an Italian pastry shop. See what they have there. If you're going to go to a nice fancy restaurant, an Italian restaurant, make sure go in and inquire before and see what they have. See what or even dine there before to see if you like the food. Never go to a restaurant that you don't know the food, the maitre d, or the waiter. One thing I hate more than anything is when I go somewhere is when people don't respect the fact that you're paying good money and they don't take care of you. It's always classy to tip the host. You give him a five spot. You know that he'll look out for you. Or he'll tell the waiter, "Hey, listen, take care of him. He's a friend of mine." Something to always do when you go out. I do it. Somebody seats me. Hey, thank you very much. Here's $5. Or if the bus girl's coming, you throw $2 in the apron. Hey, thank you very much. And they look at you. Nobody ever tips me. Well, I'm a little different. Thank you. You're working too. $2 or $3 is not the point of how much. It's the gesture of what you did. And if you make those gestures, people will automatically cling to you, and it will make a good impression on your gumad and your lady friend.
Expert tips from an expert Italian. I love it. That's good stuff there. Listen, Vito, anybody listening right now, if they want to keep up with you and make sure that they stay in line with the Godfather of Wrestling, Big Vito LoGrasso, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, before you sign off on this, okay, I got a bone to pick with you. Now, I happen to be on this website, and you were on this website for dating. I couldn't believe that you were on the same website as me. And I was like, man, what is Duke doing on this website? I'm shocked. And this is something I came on upon, just, randomly. I seen your picture. I started laughing. So the name of the website was midget.com. So I said, no, don't laugh because this is serious. All right. So I said, why would Vito be on midget.com? Being this an Italian stud, handsome, debonair, looking, always got a lady by him, you know. You know what my answer is? It's because I'm looking for short relationships. All right?
Oh my
Short
God.
ones. No, no, no. But you were on there looking for ladies who couldn't get on rides at Disney because you weren't tall enough. Tell me you're going to deny this.
Listen, I like to have people in low places. All right, just remember that.
So you go to midgets.com to look for
That's
fruit
right.
monsters. I can't believe
You're
this.
gonna get me whacked. You're gonna get me whacked. Just so you know. All right.
Or slapped. I'll tell you one or the
Yeah.
other.
One or the other.
But at least my thing was I was looking for short relationships. So you could believe it. You know, this is who I am. But you
Unbelievable.
used it for something totally different. I was impressed.
Tell them my business out here. We're gonna start calling you the Stoolie now. Tell them my business out here. Jesus.
Is it Stooley or Stugotz? Which one? Stu.
Stu.
Stu. Stu.
All right. How
All
can they
right,
keep
go
up with
ahead.
you?
Ask me the next question. Where can we find Big Vito LoGrasso? I'm going to tell you guys because this was one hell of a interview. This is one hell of a show. You know, this is Italian mob life, wise guy style. This is the friends of ours. This is everything you want to listen to. Okay, and this is something that's going to be big. You can find me on TikTok. You can find me on Twitch. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me at Facebook. It's the Big Vito brand. Guys, go to X. You'll find me on there. This is going to be a fascinating thing. Duke, it was a pleasure to be on this show. Why don't you tell the people where they can find you and show off the name of this show, Duke? Go ahead, do it.
Well, of course, folks, you're listening to the Friend of Ours podcast. You'll be able to check us out every week with your Sunday paper and your pastries and what have you there. Duke Loves Rasslin on Facebook, on Twitter, Duke Loves Rasslin at gmail.com. Let me know what you think of the show. Any questions, birthday shout outs, the whole 9 yards, especially all of you guys who want to impress the ladies the Italian way. Okay, this is your hookup here. We got Big Vito LoGrasso here. You got me. I know a little something about a little something. We'll be able to help you out. So definitely send in your questions, your dating advice. You know what you want to. What should you order at the restaurants? The drinks you should make. What should you make for breakfast? We got the hookup here. I have it on good authority that Vito has a hell of a gravy recipe. By the way, it's not sauce, it's gravy, but that's another story for another day.
Dude, it's
Listen,
sauce. Where do you come from? It's sauce. You say this all the
listen.
time and you aggravate the shit out of me when you say this.
It's
Jesus.
gravy. It's gravy. Okay. I don't know. Listen, if we go back home, what are they going to call it? They're going to call it gravy. They would never tell you it's sauce. What's going on with you? You're too
No,
Americanized here, Vito.
Americanized, you're still living with the Amish out there in the Boston wilderness.
God. Leave my Amish alone. Listen, they know how to make a good piece of bread. All right, don't mess with my Amish here. You're starting trouble now. I'm telling you right. Jesus Christ, you're going to get me in trouble with everybody.
I could see you on one of those horse and buggies, charging everybody $15 a ride. I could see it.
Oh my God, brothers and
It is
sisters!
Christmas
Until
time.
next time, like can we get a toast? Can we get an Italian toast to take us out?
All right. Here it is. A chin down and a salute. May you have happiness and health. Christmas is here. Let's have good cheer. We'll see you next week.
A friend of ours, he'll stand up tall. Through gunfire smoke, he'll never fall. With heart of gold and steel resolve, a mystery we'll never solve. A mystery